Here are the players that are about to go absolutely nuclear in fantasy football, as well as a list of players that are actually ticking time bombs you need to get off your roster as soon as you can. Push them off to somebody else, get them on somebody else's team. A good buy low we're going to start out with is Jaden Reed. As we get into it, make sure to like this video. It helps me out a ton as a creator. And if you are new, hit that subscribe button. I am on a mission to create 25,000 fantasy football experts like yourselves with a bunch of statistics and data nobody else is going to tell you. But Reed has been super unlucky so far this year. He's had to play with Malik Willis, number one. Jordan Love has also been injured. He has also been injured himself, not playing his full snap percentage. He's only had 2 games so far this year over a 75% snap share. That's not normal. He's clearly the wide receiver 1 here. I promise you his snaps and route participation is only going to increase in due time. And the great news here is that the Packers with Jordan Love are top 10 in passing statistics, passing yards, passing volume, red zone efficiency as well. And the Packers have a relatively easy rest of season schedule as far as defenses that allow a good amount of points to fantasy wide receivers, especially in their fantasy football playoffs. They have some great matchups. So if you have a winning record, that's something you should probably be looking for now when you start to make your trades. But easily, by far the number 1 trade high, sell high, do whatever you have to do to get him off your team and get some kind of value in return is Mark Andrews. And I stand by this. You look at his fantasy point performances from the last 2 weeks. 15.6 fantasy points in week 6 against the Commanders. Then obviously you have the 20-point game against the Buccaneers last week. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And you look at this and you say, all right, there's some real improvement here. He's getting red zone usage. He's getting some targets. But there really is no difference in anything that he's seeing this year. His snap percentage has not increased. It's been around the same all season. His routes run on those snaps hasn't increased. It's actually been going down for the past few weeks. The last time he had a route participation rate below 80% was in 2019. In 2024 right now, it is 59% in his route participation. That is not good. You look even deeper at the rest of these statistics in targets per route run over the last few years. 25% in 2020, pretty good. 25% again in 2021. 26% in 2022. 22% in 2023. Sorry, it's a lot of 20s. 16% in 2024. And you look at the pass volume for Lamar Jackson, they're actually 19th in passing attempts and 8th in passing yards, first in touchdowns. That's a pretty efficient Ravens offense. Despite leading the NFL in touchdowns and usage in the red zone, Mark Andrews has 2 end zone targets in 7 games. Now, yeah, he has 3 touchdowns. 2 of those were end zone targets. He is still splitting time and routes run with Isaiah Likely 50-50, and his floor is extremely low because of that. He's going to be a touchdown or bust player moving forward. I'm going to get him off my roster as soon as I can. I'd rather have a guy like K. Dotton, Tucker Kraft over him especially. One player that I'm looking to buy low on that isn't inherently super valuable, that's not a CeeDee Lamb, not a Jahmyr Gibbs type of guy that I like to buy low on, which I would also suggest doing that, but it's not going to be in this video, is going to be Keon Coleman. Now that we have Amari Cooper over on this team, it opens up a lot of opportunities, but let me explain this to you because it opens up some opportunities and offensive efficiency. I would like to buy low on Amari Cooper as well, but I guarantee the owners of him are not going to give him up lightly. So we'll focus on Keon Coleman. This is a guy that is the wide receiver 50. We have to remember he is a rookie, and rookies statistically start slow. We understand this. We have to know this and bake this into the price when we draft these rookies, which is why 90% of them don't go very high in fantasy football. And 90% of rookies in general are going to start slow and not be startable in the first few weeks. And people also think Amari Cooper coming to this offense is going to clog up the wide receiver room for the Bills because they have a bunch of secondary guys like Coleman, like Khalil Shakir, like Curtis Samuel. But that couldn't be further from the truth. With Cooper in his first game, only playing 33% of the snaps, he saw 5 targets, one of them being the end zone target and touchdown he ended up getting. Already, we see that he's going to improve the efficiency of this offense. And it's not like that Week 7 matchup was easy against the Panthers. It was against a really tough defense in the Titans. They don't allow a ton of points to fantasy wide receivers this year. With Cooper here, Coleman's target share has gone up from 13% for the entirety of the season to 22%. This week, he saw a season high in 34% of the air yard share, which led him to 4 receptions for 125 yards. All career highs for this rookie here. And before Cooper was on this team, again, he was seeing that 13% target share, 21% air yard share, and 2 receptions for 33 yards on average. He was not really good. Not to mention, Cooper is going to draw the biggest attention of defenses, and the coverage packages are going to be focused on him, which leaves more opportunity for Keon Coleman. Now, we do have to be 100% transparent. I can give you all these numbers and tell you he's going to be a great fantasy player, which I do believe he will, but I pride myself in telling you all of these statistics, good or bad, so you guys can help make those decisions for yourself if you want to trade for these players. 90% of the targets that Keon Coleman saw this week happened and came when Amari Cooper was not on the field. Now, is that a contradictory statement saying that Amari Cooper is actually hurting him in this offense? I would say no, because it is a 1-game span, and everything so far has been pointing to this offense being more efficient and staying on the field, which, I mean, Josh Allen has really needed wide receiver help so far this year. We look at Amari Cooper. He had 5 targets on the 12 total routes that he did play, so his target percentage was insane this week, only on 33% of the snaps. That's a good mark. I'm trying to get him on my team as well. But a player that I honestly want to give to all of my league mates and get off my team, which might be a hot take, is Tank Bigsby. He's been absolutely amazing over the past few weeks. Just last week, we saw almost 30 touches, over 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And that's without all the underlying numbers. They actually do back Tank Bigsby being a great efficient running back. 66% snap share, 74% of the RB rushes. Those numbers only increased in the red zone, which is the most valuable part of the field for fantasy football. But the main issue here is that the Jaguars running backs are extremely game dependent. In the games where the Jags control and are up, they absolutely shovel targets, shovel usage, whatever it ends up being to the running backs, and they have really good games and dominate because of it. But when they're down, they absolutely abandon that. With that being said, you can't imagine the Jaguars to be up and controlling in a bunch of these games, which would lead to a little bit of a downfall for Tank Bigsby. And you look at their upcoming schedule, the next 4 games, they get the Packers, the Eagles, Chiefs, and Lions. Those are all teams that are extremely negative in fantasy points given to the running back position. So when you're Tank Bigsby, a guy that does not run routes out of the backfield, really gets negative receiving upside. You have Travis Etienne still being in this offense. Even Dearness Johnson is getting a little bit of usage. Tank is an amazing running back. I really do believe him on the ground. But when the Jaguars aren't going to be winning and he doesn't get usage in the receiving game, he's going to be touchdown dependent moving forward. He's still a guy I would roster, but I would definitely try to sell him high for some top running backs while we still can. But hitting on another buy low, possibly, I mean, all of these buy lows are really, really good this week, but might be my favorite one that I'm going to trade for, especially if I have a winning record, is Puka Nacua, for more reasons than before, because now we have news, not even rumors, that the Rams are actively seeking trade options for Cooper Kupp, and there are a lot of teams that could use a wide receiver as good as him, and it looks like there's a real chance that he's actually going to leave this team, which puts Puka as the wide receiver 1. Obviously, nobody's coming near that, and we have him now returning from IR. The 21-day practice window has opened up. He's projected to come back in week 9. There is something behind the scenes of this Rams offense that we just don't know about yet, which makes him an insanely good buy low candidate. I mean, we know how good Puka is. I don't really have to sell anybody on that. He was the wide receiver 4 in his rookie year. He had a 30% team target share, which is absolutely insane. The wide receiver 9 in total targets per game, wide receiver 3 in yards after the catch, and also played 30% of his snaps out of the slot, which is another good sign. His value is insanely cheap right now because he hasn't played forever and he hasn't necessarily had a huge game so far this year, so I would 100% advise you to trade for him, even if you don't have an insanely good winning record, as long as you can hold him on your bench for that time until week 9. But next up, a bit of a if they zig, we zag kind of move. A guy I would be trading away is going to be Malik Neighbors, and this guy has been absolutely amazing. We cannot even lie about that. The wide receiver 4 in catchable air yards per game so far this year. He's a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per route run. The wide receiver 1 in target share at 36.8%. Literally insane. The wide receiver 1 in air yards, wide receiver 2 in targets per game with 12. I could go with even more numbers if I wanted to. But then you see last week, he put up 8 fantasy points. He saw the same amount of routes run and snaps as he did earlier in the year, so it's not really a concussion issue. He wasn't restricted because of injury. So you're thinking, okay, it was just one bad game. He still had 8 targets. He can't really be that much of a sell high. But the reason I am panicking just slightly on this game is because this was the first outing where Giants offensive lineman Andrew Thomas was not in, and we saw exactly what that did to this offense. In the first game without Andrew Thomas, Malik Neighbors was 3rd in air yards. Again, but they were uncatchable air yards, the complete 180 of catchable air yards. Number 1 was Xavier Worthy with 120. Ridley and Mason Tipton were tied for number 2 with 81, and then Malik Neighbors at number 3 with 75 uncatchable air yards. The reason that is important is because the Giants offense is 100% going to struggle. Daniel Jones is already frantic. He's not going to have as much time to pass in the pocket. We saw it last week. His time per dropback insanely decreased. They've had issues with the offensive line before. It's not going to help these wide receivers get valuable targets when your quarterback cannot have time to go through reads and pass and let plays develop downfield, which is where Malik Neighbors is getting a bunch of his targets. And guess what? This isn't a 1 or 2 week thing. Andrew Thomas is out for the rest of the season. Everybody loves to see great players put up like 1 or 2 bad games and say, all right, this is a buy low candidate. Let's go ahead and get him. It doesn't necessarily always mean that's true. You got to look at the underlying numbers, and this really does hurt the Giants. By no means am I saying Malik Neighbors is a sell high panic player. I still think he's most likely going to finish top 10 in wide receiver stats this season. I would trade him for a guy like AJ Brown, Jamar Chase. I mean, Justin Jefferson if you can get him, but you probably can't. Even Tyreek Hill. I'm not panicking, but I definitely am moving him down my rankings because this is true, and a lot of people are using this as a buy low for Malik Neighbors, trying to get them on your team. So if you can take advantage of that and get a good guy, why not go ahead and see what you can get at the very least for Malik Neighbors. Let me know what you guys think about Malik Neighbors and drop any questions you have in the comments. I'd love to help you guys out with those. But turning to a player we need to buy low is going to be Devonta Smith, coming off a terrible game last week with the Giants on the other side of the ball. It was not good. He's the wide receiver 35 right now. Coming off that game against the Giants where he had 0.8 fantasy points, 2 targets, 1 catch, and -2 yards, despite playing 80% of the snaps. He actually played more snaps and had more routes run than A.J. Brown, who on the other side had 19.9 fantasy points. It's just unlike him for something like that to happen. But the reality of it is we can't worry too much because Jalen Hurts only had 14 passing attempts for 114 yards. That is insanely low, by far the lowest in the NFL last week, like by a good margin compared to average. That's not going to happen usually for the Eagles. They have a pretty positive rest of season schedule for fantasy wide receivers as well, including the playoffs. So I do want to be sending trade offers for him, and I still do believe that there is a true gap between A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith as the wide receiver 1 and 2. All of the numbers also back that statement. A.J. Brown had a 37% team target share compared to 20% for Devonta Smith on the season. It doesn't necessarily matter because this offense is so good. But considering a trading away target that I honestly would be looking for is Javonte Williams. The situation here, he has a ton of green flags. I feel like all of my sell high guys in this video are somewhat of hot takes. This guy completely turned around his season from the beginning of the year. He was averaging 2 yards per carry and then completely turned that around just under 5 yards per carry. He had a 21% avoided tackle rate so far this year, second highest mark of his entire career. He had a 61% snap share last week, 40% carry share. Not the greatest numbers in the world, especially considering we know for a fact that Sean Payton does not run a one running back system, but he does draw a bunch of RB screens and get them used in the receiving game. He always has, he always will. So that does provide a little bit of a floor for fantasy football. But the Broncos cannot be trusted in predictable offense. That goes for the rest of the season as far as matchups go. He does get a really good one against the Panthers this week coming up. They are top 3 in points allowed to running backs, so I would be starting him this week. And honestly, you can wait to sell him high if you want to. But then he follows that up with the Ravens, the Chiefs, Falcons, all bottom 7 in fantasy points allowed to the running back position. He is game script dependent as far as offense goes, but in those negative game scripts where they have to lean on the pass because they're down in games, which is likely going to be a lot this season, the run game is going to be very volatile and he's going to be touchdown dependent, or he's going to absolutely need every single target out of this backfield, which also isn't a surefire thing to say because Jaleel McLaughlin is also running routes out of the backfield. Yes, it is a fraction of what Javonte is, but it's still a fact that he's not getting 100% of that. But that is going to finish off this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one coming very soon.